Hello and welcome to episode 56 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogan1701. With me is someone who is taking a break from his other job at Churchill Downs, Greendragoon.
Another one of those references I don't know if I quite get.
It's the Kentucky Derby weekend, man. Come on.
Well, sports references are lost on me.
Lost on a lot of people in this community, apparently. And we have a man who's taking a break from dealing with Canada's exploding whale problem, Hippiejohn.
Whales, they're really, really big, and when they explode, they make a lot of stuff.
Yes, they do.
A lot of flying stuff.
Markhawkman is working today and unable to join us, but we will be back to our regular Wednesday time slot next week. Trust me, everybody, you will not want to miss that one. We have something really cool in store. But since my schedule's been kind of hectic on Wednesdays, we decided to do another weekend show, which allows us to have Foundry author and podcaster Chivalrybean join us. Welcome.
Heyo. So, you know there actually was an exploding whale here in Oregon, right?
You talking about the one back in the 70s, or?
Yeah, that washed up and they decided, if we put all the dynamite on the side opposite the ocean, it will blow it into the ocean. Except it didn't work.
Everybody go search for that on YouTube. It's really sort of funny.
Who in their right mind thought that was a good idea?
Yeah. The one I was thinking about was they got some problem up in Canada right now where they have some dead whales that are rotting and bloated and might explode. And it's going to be really nasty if it does. So, Chivalrybean, for those of us who don't know, tell everybody what you do over at Priority One.
At Priority One, I do an occasional Foundry review. The main goal I have over there is to let the listeners know, hey, this mission was fun, give it a shot, a little bit about the story and what I liked about it, and usually some area that could be improved, because I like to tell people what they do wrong. And it's always good, because some people are maybe authors as well, so nice to give out some advice. But mainly that's there for the people who play as opposed to make missions, because we have several podcasts that talk about, or at least claim to talk about, making how to make Foundry missions. So I figured I'd do something a little different for Priority One.
Well, it's good to have all the different niches filled. So, big news is the downtime is almost over. The editor was turned back on Tuesday evening, if I recall correctly. Reviewing remains off for the time being. Obviously, if anyone encounters any bugs, please report it, especially if it's a new bug introduced in Season 9. The only one that I'm currently aware of and that I've currently encountered, of course, is the door issue at Earth Space Dock. For those of you not keeping up, we have 2 or more doors that didn't automatically translate over to new Earth Space Dock. Specifically, the old console outside the transporter room, which is now in the conference room, and the old door by Linnea's desk that led downstairs, which is now in the bridge officer office. So, but if you have a mission that used to use either of those doors, it will require a manual republish to work properly.
Yeah, and really, you should be checking it if you have any use of assets on the ESD social map.
When you open your mission, you'll get a little notice that says, one of the assets used in this mission, I'm directly quoting here, has been deprecated or depreciated or something like that, and will deprecated, I think is the word, and will be replaced with another asset. Please check your mission. Please check that your mission works as intended with this asset. Now, we asked what that really means, and Cryptic Frost's response was, it basically just means that we have a new version of Earth Space Dock and check your mission. I asked him, why couldn't they just say that? And he says, you expect programmers to use plain English?
No, how do you expect them to maintain their cred as a miracle worker?
There is that. So there is one other problem, which the chat room was kind enough to remind me about, is that there's something wrong with the lie flat front animation that makes people lie down in the front. A lot of people use it for like dead bodies, things like that. I think it's just completely not working.
No, actually, it's been replaced with a new dead animation that basically has them kind of like sprawled on their back.
Okay.
It's actually a really cool animation. It just doesn't fit the description anymore, and there's a couple of people who have were using the lie flat to obscure the NPC's face.
Ah.
And so now that doesn't work for that instance.
It would be nice to still have the old one and the new one.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people really want, because I mean the new one is actually really cool, and let's face it, I mean we use that lie flat animation a lot.
Yeah.
And so
I think we have 2 people using it right now, in fact, on the stream.
But yeah, having more than just one dead animation would be really handy. And the new one, it looks great. I mean, I like it. It looks very nice and realistic. But yeah, it's more aligned with what would happen if someone, if you shot an NPC and it fell down. That's more of what this new animation looks like.
Now, I saw Ashcrick in the in-game chat channel earlier today saying something about how it wasn't working for animals and it wasn't working for Undine.
This might be related, because I know someone was reporting also that it wasn't working for civilian Romulan NPCs. And so it might be a case of just certain NPCs, for some reason the animation isn't working properly.
We have civilian Romulan NPCs?
I can only report what I was told. I didn't know about that, but then again, I don't...
Hey, see, there are still things about the Foundry that I don't even know, so... but, you know, it's really been a very smooth overall transition. I mean, we had the publishing issue kind of in the middle of last week for a few days where you'd hit publish and it would just give you an error message. It wasn't happening all the time or to everybody. It was sort of hit and miss. It was probably happening more often than it wasn't, though. But we did find out something interesting when they fixed that, though, is that apparently Jfinder is the cryptic Foundry guru. Supposedly he's still more attached to the Neverwinter team than he is to our team, but he is the mystery Foundry guru that the cryptic EQAH mentioned over Twitter not too long ago.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, at the very least, it's a sign that someone is paying at least a little bit of attention to the Foundry.
Mm-hmm. And we definitely know that Taco, at the very least, is paying a lot of attention to the Foundry. He's been, you know, kind of all over interacting with us while we've been having these issues.
Yeah. And I mean, I definitely think he kind of feels a certain personal responsibility for it, because he was the one who assembled the new ESD. So I don't know if he'll be around quite as much once all the issues get resolved.
Yeah, probably not. But, you know, obviously, we're going to run into some issues where there might be some authors who are not keeping up with things and are not going to know that there's this problem with their missions. And when reviewing gets on, you know, players tend to not be generous about that sort of thing. So they're going to assume that it's the player's fault that the mission is bugged. And he's going to get a lot of 1 stars. So hopefully they'll start paying attention when that happens at the very least. But I don't know. It kind of brings up an interesting issue, which is how much should Cryptic do? I'm trying to think of the words here. How much should Cryptic try and protect authors from things like this? I mean, the suggestion came up on the forums to, instead of auto-republishing everything, just set everybody's mission to unpublished and let people publish on their own.
But it also means that we would lose any mission whose author isn't still around.
Mm-hmm. Including missions that weren't started at Earth Space Dock.
Yeah.
So I guess I kind of, for a long time, have really liked that option. I think that possibly, I mean, I have no way of saying this is, you know, true or not. I mean, part of, like, we complain about there being so much in the list that clogs things up, that I suspect that if we were to do the sort of thing where there was no republish and authors had to go in and manually republish everything, that a bunch of Grinder authors would never do it, and we would end up with losing some of the grinders, which would be a good thing.
Yeah, but then there's also probably a lot of authors who make perfectly legitimate story missions that wouldn't know that they need to republish after a season.
That's true. That is true.
So unfortunately, you can't really hit the grinders without hitting everybody else.
It's like it would be
And,
like
and
throwing
there are
out.
missions that I would miss, from people that I knew personally who are long gone from the community. And I would have no way of getting in touch with them, and it would kind of suck to have those missions be gone.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't know if Cryptic could come up with some way to say if they revamped Vulcan here. Vulcan has some doors on it, right? Doesn't it?
Never actually tried.
I don't remember.
So
for example, if they revamped Vulcan again, there was a problem with one of the doors. If they could target missions that started there and set all of those to unpublish, if it was targeted, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I'm forced to wonder if they have. I mean, they've gotten. They're always talking about metrics and what they're able to tell and everything like that. If there was some way they could put a 5-line email together that said, a new season has happened, Foundry is in, any Foundry missions need to be republished, and then simply send a targeted, generic email to everyone whose account has a Foundry mission. That says a new season has happened, you need to republish your Foundry missions, kind of thing. And then it makes up for those people who aren't all the time paying attention to the forums or podcasts or what have you. So
I don't know. I mean, it kind of sounds like a massive undertaking, though.
Oh, it does. And
it's certainly a larger undertaking than they're ever going to do for Foundry.
True.
But in any case, go ahead.
Something to note. This happened to me is I'd edited my mission. This was a season ago or so, and saved it, but not republished it. In that case, it didn't republish because I think there were errors. So you could potentially protect yourself by causing something to not work. That way, it won't auto republish. Then you could go. Mine was more an accident. And I kept waiting for it to republish, and then it never did.
Yeah, always checking. I always check and make sure that because occasionally missions don't republish, and the last round in season 8, I had several that didn't republish for seemingly no reason. Because when I opened them up, there weren't any errors. And then the other thing, of course, I had is a few seasons ago, I had published a mission, then I was working on a revamp of a few things, and it was actually the unpublished version was in a broken state. And so when the season went down and when it republished in that broken state. Because, of course, it republishes with whatever you have.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't originally published before. So, I just took the whole thing down, and I'm still sort of working on that. So, why don't we move it along? Before we get started with what we've been working on, I put a thread up in the Foundry forums yesterday asking that, now the Foundry's back, what is everybody else going to be working on? So here's some of the things that we can kind of expect from the community. Faye8472, who also goes by P. Sutherland, he's rebuilding one of his missions, Last of the Ashkar. He's working on one called The Weak Will Perish, and he's spell-checking one called Mirror Wars.
I'm mad at him for that title. Damn it, Sutherland. The Weak Shall Perish. I wanted to name the mission. I totally had an idea for that, but, it's okay.
Let's see. Some guy named the Greendragoon 1 says, same thing I've been working on for some time and will be working on for some time, In the Shadow of Midas Part 2.
I don't know that guy. Probably a jerk.
Sounds like he never gets anything done.
Yeah.
I know.
Let's see. Borrowed Tune says, new project in the initial stages. Some maps are coming along nicely, but the story is still scattered in his head. I know how that goes sometimes. He was also talking about it's impressive that some of you guys seem to have titles before you start. That's the last thing he does. I replied that it's actually usually the other way around. I usually go and find a title after I've built half the mission or more. I don't know. How do you guys come up with your titles?
I don't know. I mean, I've only got the one mission to go on, but for a long time, it kind of came out when I started to think about how I wanted the overarching arc to go. And so I actually had 3 separate titles for each part. So one was like the In the Shadow of Midas, one was like the Hand of Midas, and I can't remember what the third one was. And I ended up deciding that it was going to just be overly complicated, and not all of the titles fit very well. So I ended up just simplifying it to 1, and then adding part 1, 2, and 3.
Nice.
Was it going to be Midas Breaks?
I think not that I know of. I can't break the Midas array. It's a canon piece of arc or canon structure.
There's a car brakes company called Midas Brakes.
Oh.
Now he gets it.
That's okay.
Well, of course, you guys all know I use song titles for my mission titles most of the time. So sometimes it goes because I fit the. Sometimes I have a song in mind because like the title fits what I was going for, and sometimes like my challenge mission, I just got to the end of the mission and I looked through my playlist for something that might fit a Mirror Universe mission. But my next one, Sympathy for the Devil, just seemed to fit in place with what I'm getting at, which is going to be a sympathetic villain that you almost feel bad about stopping.
Yeah.
For me, I
even though the song is not actually about that.
For me, I either have a really cool title, like, oh, I need a story that I can put this to, or I have no idea what to name my story or mission.
For me, it depends on what I'm writing. Mayhem, I came up with 6 titles and decided what order the whole story kind of fell in. So I knew the titles of every mission that's, of all 5 of those before I got started. So most of the time, I don't have a title for a mission until somewhere in the middle. And I try to aim toward the title having something to do with the underlying theme of what I'm doing. Yeah.
I guess whether or not you can come up with a title early or late really depends on where the concept for the story really falls. Whether it's something that you kind of develop as you work through it, or whether it's something that you have the concept all figured out before you even get it into the editor.
Yeah. But honestly, with Mayhem, it was I decided I needed to make a mission called DJ Gur-Ein's Dance Party that wasn't a I'm angry at grinders mission that the community manager asked me to take down politely. I really wanted to, find a way to, and that's where the character of the villain came from. I was like, ooh, I could do that. And yeah, so that all happened mainly because of something silly I did a year ago. Or a year and a half ago, I made that thing.
Oh, probably last February, right?
Yeah.
It was right close to the time we were starting the show.
Yes, it was.
Was when all that blew up.
Yep.
So let's see, back to the thread here. Rogue Enterprises says he has restarted work on Orders Part 3, which is the last of his Orders series. The first 2 parts are up before the downtime, and actually Part 1 will be reviewed later on this show. Ash Crick says he's going to work on advertising Part 3 of his series, which was just released, and he will be eventually starting Part 4. A. Falconer, who is one of a longtime author that I haven't heard from in quite a while, Says he's working on building the primary map to a new mission. Working title is Dark Side of Vulcan. That quite sounds interesting. He says the first is 2 or 3 part series. First part deals with a murder on Vulcan, and you play Sherlock Holmes.
Cool.
It was Jack the Ripper.
Again. Okay, I'm.
That was so
Let's
like
see.
the slasher.
There you go.
Star Sword C has something in Latin that I'm not even going to try to pronounce, but he says loosely translated, it's righting old wrongs. Essentially, he says it's going to be a deconstruction of Voyager, where you go into the Delta Quadrant through the Dyson Spheres and attempt to fix some of the damage Janeway did to the Federation's reputation. Let's see. Voporak says he's working on revamping morals and ethics since it's relatively old and desperately needing some love. That's one I've heard a lot about. I've never had actually the chance to play.
I've played it, and didn't you review that Hippiejohn a few weeks back?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I was like, yes, I reviewed it 2nd episode this season.
I was about to say, and this is the moment in
Yeah.
the podcast where I wish they would cut out the dead air when Hippiejohn forgets to press his mute button.
Nope, we're live.
The joys of live.
Keeps us honest.
All right, let's see. Pax says that he has not had much chance to be in the Foundry yet, but once he does, he's going to be back at Worth on Valley of the Shadow Part 3. That's good, because, of course, we played Part 2 in our live stream not too long ago. He says the map itself is already done. It's actually a reuse of the city map from Part 1. I remember that being a pretty good map. He just has to add NPCs and a story to it, and then the real hard work will begin. Let's see, determining just what he will need in the 5th map, which would be a custom interior, and needs to design it. He says he's also building the intro dialogue for Twilight of the Gods, Act 1, which is a planned KDF trilogy of his. Take place mainly on Kronos in the distant past. That'd be interesting. That's actually something I've wanted to do. Do something about ancient Klingons. So,
Including myself in this group, do we do many multi-parters?
in what way?
I don't know. It just seems like the multi-part missions is a very popular format.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
I think it's good when it's longer, because you can do a longer story. Because you could sometimes put it all in one mission, but it's at least, I think, nicer if it's cut in half. If there's a good spot, then you don't have to play it all at once. Whereas if you have to stop in the middle, it's like another hour just to click next map until you get back to where you were.
Well, I remember Rogue Enterprise saying that his Orders series, actually the first part, started out as one mission. He had to cut it in half because it was getting too long. I don't know, when I built my big series, I had always envisioned it as a series. And I ran into the part where I got to part 4 and had nothing. I had no idea what to put in it. I knew what part 5 was going to be, but I had no idea what to put in part 4.
Yeah.
Filler.
Well, I hope it was at least good filler. Let's see. Sir Boulevard says that he is working on Sands of Gornar. He's put aside his Fed mission until the Odyssey uniforms are available in the Foundry. I never say don't hold your breath.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure it would be nice, and I'm not going to say we'll never get it, but yeah, don't expect it on
I
any
will
particular
cheer if we
timetable.
do. But and our other co-host, who's not here today, Markhawkman, says that he is revamping his mission Darkness Between the Stars, which was a Foundry Challenge entry. So lots of great stuff to look forward to. So let's talk about what we're all working on here. So, Dragoon, have you been able to get in and start back up on Midas?
Not too much. Mostly it's been dealing with a lot of real life stuff as well as enjoying a lot of the Season 9 content. I wasn't expecting the downtime to end as soon as it did. I mean, usually at this point we're still in like the second week of downtime, and we've got at least another week before we'll get into the editor. So, I mean, I was kind of shocked to have the editor come back so soon.
Yeah, kind of we all were. It was very quick.
Well, I think I should write a note to their devs or something complimenting on the
Absolutely. Thank
smooth
you.
transition.
Let's hope it goes this smooth every time.
I don't know. One would hope that means that they're getting better at it.
Or there just wasn't anything wrong with it this time, frankly.
Yeah, but a lot of things changed that did impact the Foundry.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's the trick. Maybe it's the seasons that have absolutely zero impact on the Foundry are the ones that horribly break it.
Seems to be. Very strange. Let's see, Hippiejohn. What will you be working on if you haven't been working on something already?
What will I be working on if I haven't been working on something? I actually have been working on something, which is last week I talked about wanting to play around with like the 5-act structure of a classic TV show, and I built a map just trying to see if I could on a map get that feel of like the first 5 minutes of a show, and I've been working on a map where I'm trying to figure out how to make the sky get really super bright all of a sudden and then go back to a standard level. So that's what I'm working on right now, is trying to make the sky explode, as it were. And actually having a lot of fun with it. I've made a map that takes about as I run through it without the effect of the sky getting really bright and such. It takes me about 6.5 minutes to run through the map, so it feels like it works out about right. Like after that 6.5 minutes, you should hear the the swelling theme song and. There you go, kind of thing. So that's what I'm working on, is trying to fit a story and the editor to do that.
So you need a good title sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you couldn't do it where you just have the player go in a straight line in a space map with warp stars coming at them, and some reach markers along the way that get some fly-in text.
Oh, that'd be neat.
Yeah. And with a little note that says, go find the Next Generation theme on YouTube real quick and crank it.
I was thinking about you're wanting to make the sky seem bright, and the only way I can think of doing that might be maybe a combination of the heat wave effect and the like. Maybe you can throw like some nebulas up in the sky and try and get the bloom to blow out.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe nebulas and what is the name of that stupid effect? Horrible bloom or something like that it's called.
There's a bloom effect, but I think it's
horrendous bloom or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It might be space only.
Yeah. Well, I think it maybe also be in the background.
Right.
It's like I think it's like a custom space background.
I figure if I can, if I get lucky and I can kind of control what direction the players are facing at that point in time, then I can do what you said and hopefully just use like they appear for a second kind of thing in the sky. And hopefully that'll light up the map a little. Who knows? I'm playing around with it. It's fun.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Chivalrybean, will you be doing anything in the Foundry now that it's back?
I haven't done much after my first mission, Unexpected Reflection. Ding! I don't know. If I get a really good idea, maybe. But I'm almost like if for some reason I actually get the object mover and build your own maps, I'll try. But I just don't have everything I want to do so badly that I want to do it again.
Well, if people will stop exploiting so much, maybe we can get some of those things.
Yeah, for real.
So let's see. Oh, go ahead.
One thing I always was when I first heard about Neverwinter, I was hoping I could make Neverwinter missions and then convert it to dilithium, but that didn't work.
Oh no, you can only convert. I think you can only get Astro Diamonds out of those.
That would be totally cool if you could transfer the currency between games.
Yeah. You know
That'd
that's
be
never going to happen.
I'm sure that's problematic.
Yeah. Plus, Astral Diamonds and Dilithium aren't weighted the same way.
Right,
Astral
but
Diamond,
if you could buy Zen and then buy dilithium with the Zen, that would be cool. Because then you would essentially it would be the same. Zen is obviously the same between games.
yeah, but it means that I could theoretically transfer my the Zen I get from my stipend into something like Champs where I don't have a subscription.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be cool though. Yeah, I almost started to make missions for Neverwinter, but then I don't play it enough, so it's like.
That was my issue. Like, I love the fantasy genre. I wanted to make Neverwinter missions. And then I played the game and I was like, I don't like playing the game. Why do I want to make missions for it?
Well, I still play it. It's just usually in small doses.
Yeah, the
Small
most fun I
doses,
had
yeah.
was in the Foundry though. There was some really good missions and there were some absolutely ridiculous missions
I
that
found
were
one
also
that
fun.
was a retelling of The Wizard of Oz, which was absolutely brilliant.
There's
but
one
I
I
think-
played. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think if I were to make missions over there, which I had considered doing, they would probably just be, horrendously bad Tolkien ripoffs. Just because that's like my favorite thing ever, besides Star Trek.
I don't know. Maybe we should all three get together and try and tackle it.
There we go.
There's one I played where I'm not even sure what they did, but it was one of the things where like the whole scene changed, kind of like if you load a map on top of a map, and it was like, oh man, if I could do this in Star Trek, because there's no way I could figure out without being able to just build your own thing. So maybe
I've done it. It was very complicated. Essentially, I built a map inside of a map. I built hallways inside of other hallways and just despawned the inside hallways, and suddenly you were in another map, crossing over the mirror universe. In fact,
Yeah, this
it
was more
very
akin-
complicated.
This was almost akin to the Dyson Sphere mission when you walked and then like the whole sky changed. I mean, it was that dramatic of a change.
Oh, gotcha.
So
Which is one of our favorite things about that mission,
yeah,
and something we wish we could do: change sky files on cue.
Yeah.
Cryptic, if you're listening.
That list is a long one, though.
Ridiculously long. So let's see. I will be working on, of course, Sympathy for the Devil, my new mission, which I did get the script done for. So it's just going to be mission building as soon as the double dilithium event is over. Actually, really, it's as soon as the double XP event over in Star Wars: The Old Republic is over. That's when I'll be back to Foundry building. It happens to be the same weekend as double dilithium.
You have...
And there's double something over in Neverwinter, isn't there? Double
You have
XP?
so many
yeah.
games that you play.
Yes, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I even occasionally drop into Defiance sometimes. So.
picked up
And Lord of the
Firefall
Rings.
this week after
I
having not
did
played it
try
for-
Firefall a little bit. Yeah,
I think I played
it was
it like
interesting.
6 months ago, and then
I haven't even tried it. I know that it's just not my style of game. I don't like
Yeah,
first-person
probably
shooters.
not. Actually,
Yeah.
I'm not a big first-person shooter person
it's
either.
third person, but I think probably still not your style.
Yeah.
I don't know. I liked it because it offered quite a few like more tactical options, like, especially like the engineer they have over there, because it kind of reminds me of an engineer here, where you can like throw down like turrets and whatnot.
Nice.
The jetpacks are fun.
I thought about downloading it and playing it, and then I was like, wait a minute, I can't download and play a game just because I think the community manager is cool.
Brandon likes it. Is that not good enough?
I was hoping he'd go work for Star Citizen, but
One could hope, but yeah, they're in Santa Monica.
he said the commute was a little bit too far.
Yeah.
Because
So
I asked.
where are they based out of?
Santa Monica?
Barbara?
Oh,
Santa
Monica.
somewhere. Santa Monica.
Yeah, I think it's Santa Monica.
Yeah.
Which is a couple hours away, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a drive. That's a drive
From the Bay Area.
Yeah, if he was going to do that, he might as well.
Of course,
have
anything
stayed
in the Bay
Crooked.
Area is like an hour away from anything else. It takes a long time to get anywhere around there.
Yeah.
So let's see. Let's move on to mission reviews. Hippie, why don't you start us off?
Sure, Hippie, why don't you start us off right while I'm taking a drink of water to... Okay, yeah, I do have a mission review for today. The mission that I reviewed was Orders Part 1 by Rogue Enterprise. And it, as I said last week, I had played it last week, and then this week I did my typical go back and play a mission again so that I have a kind of a fresh perspective on it and have taken notes that I didn't take the first time, that sort of thing. So the basis of this mission is, to me, really interesting in that it's a kind of a mission we don't see a lot in any Foundry that I've experienced, really, and that is what I call a prime directive mission. This mission really kind of hinges a lot around where you fall on, where your choices fall on how you enforce the prime directive in a very interesting way. The story, like, first I need to note that as a part 1, this does a really good job. It hits all those expositional beats that you need to hit so that you know what's going on in the story, or at least as much as you need to know for the parts of the mystery that are unfolding around you in part 1. So for a part 1, it does that really well, and it manages to remain exciting with interesting gameplay elements. Like I was doing things in this mission that were, modulate a satellite and warp in this direction and do that. And honestly, it was as much fun as fighting a bunch of starships. Now, I fully admit that I'm a different kind of player, and I really like that kind of gameplay of flying around and doing things that feel very Star Trek to me. The way I got to the planet was brilliant. It was great. It was different gameplay, stuff that, like I said, I had not seen before. The next thing to note is that a lot of the mission in spots where dialogue can get a little overwhelming, because, like any good author, Rogue has a lot to say, and he wants to at least make you able to hear it if you want to. And in this case, he does that through one of our favorite things here on the show, which is a lot of optional dialogue, which is... you can get more information about the planet, more information about the mission in general in a couple of different scenarios, where you also just have a button to click that says, no, just move on. And I love that. I went and read every bit of text that there was, but the fact that the button was there to just say, no, I don't want to read this, was great. One thing I would note about the story, though, is that it does reflect the Federation Klingon conflict, or rather the conflict of the greater powers in the galaxy. And at one point it talks about how some of this this tentative, very new alliance stuff like the Nukara Strike Force and Task Force Omega, how what's happening could threaten the unity of those things. Now, I know that Rogue put this together just before Season 9 launched, and so once Season 9 launched, all of a sudden, that little part of the explanation of why everything is important can be expanded on. And I mean, it doesn't have to. It certainly works just fine the way that it is. But there is an opportunity there, and this is as early as in the Mission Giver dialogue, of saying there is a new accord between the Federation and the Klingon Empire. And this, it could just be the addition of a couple of lines on top of the other things that could potentially be threatened here by saying something, the new accord that we have reached could be threatened by this. It's just, there's a really good opportunity to reference Season 9 at the very beginning of this mission that I think could be used and would be great. This mission is full of this is my negative about the mission, but it's also the biggest positive about the mission, and that is in this mission, Rogue really, really goes for it. As far as trigger work and effects and tricks that the Foundry can do, and sometimes it looks just so amazing. Some of the stuff that he has you doing and the way that things trigger and entire maps, entire maps change in front of you. I mean, this was a really, really full, visually stimulating mission. There's a lot going on, and that is brilliant. He does some things that I have never seen before, and that really caught my attention. And here is where I would say it's also the part about the mission that I didn't like. And that is when you really go for it as far as triggers and effects and everything else that's going on. When it works, when something that you've set up an intricate, bunch of triggers to do, when it works, it looks incredible, and it looks just, it's a wonderful experience. When something misfires on one of those triggers, and when something fails to go off or goes off and someone beams inside of a wall or something, when something goes wrong, it is so much more noticeable when everything around it is going off with lots of really visually stimulating triggers and things are happening the way they should, and then all of a sudden there's a random Borg drone that should have despawned, that now I'm fighting in a spot of the map that I shouldn't have had to fight anyone. Actually, it wasn't me. It was my boss that ended up doing it. But it was a spot where something should have, something I believe should have despawned, but because it was an enemy mob, perhaps, one member of the enemy mob did not despawn or something, and it basically that happened a couple of times for me. Is not that exact problem, but the problem of so much going on and one piece of this intricate trigger network that he had built failed and didn't work the way that he wanted it to, and was just incredibly noticeable against all of this other stuff. So it was really great. And I certainly can't encourage someone, I wouldn't discourage anybody from doing what Rogue did here and really just trying new things and going for it. But at the same time, be cautious of how much you're putting into each little trigger thing and where it can fail, and get other people to test those for you. Because, as I said, I played the mission twice, and sometime in one case, the same thing happened to me twice, and that was the bit with the Borg drone that appeared after it should have been despawned. That happened to me twice. In another section, it was something to do with a wall or an explosion, and it only occurred the second time that I played it. Another thing, I was looking for it to occur because it had happened the first time, and then it didn't. So it's one of those, when the triggers, failed, they failed, and they looked weird. There's one thing that I wanted to address that was that kind of took me out of the mission a little bit, and that is, he built a section of your ship, and I know exactly why he did it. You can tell based on the way that the maps trigger and everything happens. There's a section of your ship that he built where there are pollens and flowers and stuff floating all through the air, all over the deck. And it's because he built the map on a foresty. I'm certain that it's a background effect of the map itself that just translates to everything that's on the map. And so inside of the corridors of your ship, you've got pollen and nonsense floating through the air, and the only indication of why that's happening, in fact, the first time through, I was going to note this as this is a huge mistake. Build your set higher up, do something, because this looks terrible. And it was on the second time playing through that I noticed that some of the NPCs on the deck that he's got standing around are mentioning things about the environmental controls being out of whack somehow. So the only suggestion I would have there is, even as just a throw up, like, I missed it the first time. Like I said, I didn't, the particular speech bubble around that NPC never popped while I was walking around near them. And my suggestion would be, find some way to work it into the dialogue, because you're walking through this deck to go to a transporter room. So when you get to the transporter room, maybe have the transporter officer have a throwaway line somewhere in his speech that mentions the environmentals being off kilter on the deck, because that way the player is guaranteed to see the explanation for why that map was used. Because it's totally understandable. One, because he despawns an entire deck of a ship, and suddenly you're on a planet. So he couldn't build it up high if he didn't want you to just fall down, right? So it's obvious why he did it. It's just the explanation for the weirdness of stuff floating around the deck was so well hidden that I missed it the first time through.
I don't know.
So,
is it a case where he could maybe use a different background that doesn't have the weird effects built in it?
I don't know. I mean, it's a really well built map, and I doubt he would. I will say this: I doubt he would want to
Change the map.
Yeah, I doubt he would want to change the map. Is what it comes down to. So, yeah, that's it. And a final thing is, people who want to figure out how to do puzzles and are having. We know that Bazag is really good with puzzles, and we've had him on the show to talk about puzzles and such. And this mission is, I've encountered puzzles in RogueEnterprise missions before, and one of the issues that we run into in the Foundry is that most puzzles can just be brute forced through. Just keep clicking until you get the right answer, and you'll eventually solve the puzzle. These puzzles, the ones that Rogue made, are exactly like that. you could just press buttons until you got it right. But it is actually kind of fun to sit and figure out what it is that that the thought that he put into solving the puzzles, because there are two of them that are really, really good. They're a lot of fun. I sat for the first time I ran through, I sat for the amount of time it took me to actually sit and figure them out, and I'm glad that I did, because I like doing puzzles. All of the combat, aside from where something glitched in this mission, all of the combat is 100% optional. You do not have to, aside from my bridge officer shooting an errant Borg that wasn't supposed to be there, I never fired a shot in this entire mission, and I couldn't have been happier. The entire time I was engaged, having fun. The story is really good. He takes just enough time. As I said, this is a part 1, so it's got to introduce me to the major players. It does that in a really good way. I get to know them, I get to see their actions, and it's a good example of actions speak louder than words. Once I see the actions of the NPCs that he created, it allows me to get a deeper sense of the character and what's going on. So my overall review, this is a great mission. He really went for it as far as visual entertainment, and where it works incredibly, and the story is super compelling and feels very Star Trek. People should definitely go play it. I'll be reviewing part 2 next week, because this one does end at a really brilliant cliffhanger where the Prime Directive has been broken and it's been threatened, and you really are going to have to deal with it. And I was left with a very nice to be continued that made me say, I am actually interested in what happens to this planet, so I will be back for parts 2, and we'll see if that keeps me interested enough for part 3. So,
Excellent. Chivalrybean, you said you had a mission you wanted to mention?
Yeah, it's one I've talked the other podcast, but something I wanted to point out. It's called "The Devil You Know" by Vultris. Someone in the fleet, one of the fleets I'm in. One thing I liked about it is it feels very much like a lot of other Foundry missions, in a good way. Meaning, this guy says, "Here's a mission, go do this." So he's some admiral, so you go do it, and then at one point he's like, "Beam this onto your ship." It's like, okay, beam it on the ship. Don't know what it is, but he told me to. And later on, there's this force field, so you go and put your security console into your password into the console next to the force field, and to get through. And then later on, you find out, of course, the admiral's a bad guy, and the whole force field thing was a trick to steal your password. And it was a great use of what everyone does, even in cryptic maps. It's like, oh, there's a force field, well, just turn it off, which I always thought seemed silly. But he did a really good job of using the things all missions do, but it kind of was also a joke hidden in there too, and made it part of the story. So I really liked how he did that. There's a lot more to the mission than that, so I think it's worth playing. But one thing he did that didn't quite work is he had a room that was clearly, I don't know if he built it or it was just part of the room. There's like a scanner metal detector thing, which I was like, I'm not walking through that, so I purposely walked around it. But then later dialogue was like, you tripped the alarm. I'm like, no, I didn't. So I actually went back and triggered it. I think it was one of the things like it wasn't optional, but it would have been nice to make it optional. Like you could go around it if you wanted, and then you could have different dialogue, like, "Oh, you didn't trigger my trap" or whatever. But it was a pretty funny story, and one thing it did well, despite using the tropes, was it didn't break the fourth wall, which sometimes happens. Is they're trying to make a joke, and either the whole mission should just break the fourth wall the whole time, or because if you do it once, it doesn't really work that well, I think. So
Yeah, breaking the fourth wall is something that you want to do very, 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 very rarely. And it's got to be one of those things where the timing is just perfect for it.
yeah,
It's so hard to do, and Star Trek just doesn't feel like the place for it to me.
No, not a lot.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
what
even-
I liked, is he didn't do that at all.
Yeah,
When
even
he
when Star
could've.
Trek is trying to be funny, they're take it very seriously.
It's funny. I mean, you if you watch Star Trek a lot, I mean, there's not a whole lot of laugh out loud moments, really.
Except the final scene in some of the TOS episodes. Except they're not funny most of the time.
Not supposed to be funny.
Oh, yeah.
So let's see. The mission that I reviewed for today is called Terra Nova Invasion by Knight Templar 99. Is a fairly new author, has been coming in to watch the show, and has been in the in-game chat room. So he created a very, coming into this mission, the one thing that I am just like absolutely floored by as far as a new author goes is his map design. His map design is very, very good. He made a great looking space map with a lot of vertical. It was like a vertical debris field going up and down through the map. It was great looking. So let's see. He had some good interior work. He used a generic Borg interior and just went all out with custom objects in it and made it like this huge maze, which is really what a Borg ship ought to feel like. Because Borg don't design things like anybody else design things. And the way he did it, it was very narrow, and it had a couple problems with bridge officers, but it was so good that I was willing to forgive that. So, I mean, you just got lost in this labyrinth of a Borg ship, and it was great. I think it was probably the best custom Borg ship I've seen anybody do. And I've got some Borg stuff coming up in some missions, and I'm going to take a lot of inspiration from that, because he just knocked that one out of the park. He had, very similar to what you said about Rogue Enterprise's missions, is that he had a lot of his dialogue kind of fit with the sort of lessening of tensions between the Feds and the KDF that we've seen over the recent years, real-time year, I guess, I don't know, maybe a couple months in-game. The in-game time moves very slowly, comparatively. It's like reverse dog years. So I don't know if he's planning to change anything as far as now that we've got the peace agreement. I think that's a subject I want to bring up a little bit later on the show, is the peace accord. So let's see, getting back to it, he had some issues on a ground map with on this interior map with the Borg ship of interact objects being hard to find. And I think the reason they were hard to find is because of the way he set up the objective. He had it as a complete all instead of doing one after the other. And the whole objective took you you had gone from one end of the map to the other, and this was the final objective, and it took you way back to where you started. And I don't see any reason why he couldn't have each one of those be an individual objective. That way you had the smaller ring on the mini-map telling you more approximately where that object is. That is one suggestion I would have for him. Let's see. We went down to a surface map, which is a really great use of the sort of assimilated ground maps, which is not something that I've used a lot, but they're very cool. and they're very sort of almost Lovecraftian, you might say, with like almost tentacle-looking things all around, and you have lots of assimilated parts. And he built a sort of a colony into this. This is a colony that's under attack by the board. Actually, even being the Terra Nova colony from Enterprise, I guess his what you call it? His conceit is that this is still a colony. I got the impression from Enterprise that it wasn't going to be a colony anymore because the place just wasn't really all that habitable. But I digress. Let's see. He had a great interior map, and this is something that a lot of authors don't do right away, is build a custom interior map, with the platforms and the walls, putting all those down themselves. So I think it's always great when I see a new author go for that right away, because it's not the most intuitive thing in the world, but it can be done. He did it well. There were no issues that I saw on that particular map. And let's see, the only issue on that particular map is that he had I don't know, it was like a backdrop or an FX object that essentially made the whole thing very gray. And I've seen it before. I can't remember the name of it, but I would certainly consider changing that backdrop to something that, because it was really sort of almost hard on the eyes even. So I mean, there's really just absolutely no fault with his map design. And let's see, his dialogue was very tight. It wasn't there wasn't oodles and oodles of dialogue, but what there was tight, and I didn't notice any mistakes. It all seemed to flow very well. But now we come to sort of the problem with this mission, which is just combat piled upon combat piled upon combat. It's sort of the antithesis of the Rogue Enterprise mission that we just reviewed. He had a kill objective for 11 mobs. Now, for me, personally, that's just far, far too much. And I'm sort of choosing my words carefully here because I don't want the author to think this is, entirely a criticism, because as we've said on this podcast several times, is that, when I'm going through looking at these things, I'm looking at it from the perspective of not everything has to appeal to me. There might be people who don't mind an 11 mob kill objective. There might be people who just their favorite thing is to kill board, and maybe they want some story and some great map design with that. If that is the case, if there are people out there like that, this is your mission. I highly recommend it for people who love the combat, who do not mind just killing things over and over and over again, because that's what this is. This is essentially a combat mission with some story, with some great map design.
So I always kind of judge the level of content based around how it affects the pacing of the story. Mm-hmm. Did you find that having 11 combat mobs in there really dragged down the story? It
did, to be honest. And that was my big problem with it, is that it just made it drag on and on and on. Because, in that interior map I mentioned, you go through and you kill about 5 board mobs, you interact with some objects, and suddenly 5 more spawn. And it's just, it kept doing that to me. And it was like, okay, how many more times, really? How many more times? How much longer? And that's, that's one thing that you don't want your player to be. You don't want that reaction out of your player where they're just sitting there saying, oh my God, how much longer is this going to go?
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I always kind of judge it against the pacing.
Mm-hmm. And you also have to sort of judge it against, what was the author trying to do here? And maybe that's what, maybe this level of combat is what he likes. And I'm always saying, the Foundry is the author's sandbox and not the player's. So if this is what he likes, then fine. I mean, but if he's looking for, if he says, okay, maybe this is too much, maybe I can dial it back a little bit. For my preference would be to dial it back a little bit, but if that's not what he's going for, then that's entirely up to him. But I think he's a very promising author. He's definitely dedicated. He's definitely a big part of the community in the in-game chat channel, and I look forward to seeing more from him.
Oh, and it definitely sounds like he's gotten several of the tentpoles of Foundry authoring down.
Oh yeah,
So
there were just no. You talk about, sort of design decisions versus mistakes, which is something we often talk about with Cryptic, whether you're talking about bugs or a design decision that you may not like. And there were no mistakes that I could see. There were design decisions that didn't appeal to me, but there were no. I didn't see any mistakes. I didn't see any, triggers that weren't working. I didn't see any objectives that didn't go anywhere, things like that. Everything was tight as a drum. So there we are. Let us move it along to discussion topics. So let's see. Hippie, you had a topic for us. Is he on mute again?
Unmute your microphone.
Well, he must have gone to get something while I droned on about my mission. So, okay, so I mentioned earlier that I wanted to talk about the peace accord. So, with the last featured episode, we found out that it's 2410. It ended with, spoiler alert. Dragoon, if you want to throw up your spoiler. Your nifty new spoiler alert.
sorry, I didn't actually expect to have to use it.
That's right. I sprung that on you. But this is a good opportunity to.
The graphics are work in progress.
Nice. Well, I'll be spoiled. I haven't got to play it yet. Don't worry about it. I think I have an idea what happens in general.
Mm-hmm. Well, the title of the season sort of gave it away.
Hey, can I be heard again?
Yes.
Hey,
Yes.
you're back. So essentially what I wanted to talk about
Yeah,
is,
my
how should this, essentially this tentative peace agreement between the Federation and the Klingons affect Foundry missions?
I
Eh,
like what
they happened
Johnny
in the past.
I was gonna say I like what Johnny Snowball said in the chat room. Essentially, we're either creating missions. We're either creating missions for a specific point in Cryptic's timeline, or whatever we're creating is for part of the story going forward. So essentially, it's the first option. We are positioning our missions based upon where they fall in the timeline.
And that's sort of something we've always been able to do. I mean, I said, you pick and choose where exactly in the Cryptic timeline your mission falls, if that's an issue. Or for some standalone stories, it may not be an issue at all.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, not every Foundry mission revolves around the Federation is at peace or at war with the Klingons, but at the same time, I mean, there's definitely something to be said that Foundry missions don't have to take place at the direct, at the most current point in the Stowe timeline. That said, if your mission does take place earlier, it's good to kind of make a note of in your description of where this is taking place. I know Pax, when he does his Romulan missions, he kind of makes note of how, hey, this is happening. This is at this point in the Romulan story arc. So certain things haven't happened yet, and some things have. But I mean, like I said, it's just good to note that so the author can has an idea of where it fits.
They could add a flashback tag to the Foundry.
Well, I mean, it's kind of a tricky thing because, especially if your mission isn't level gated, you really have no idea how far along the author or the player is in the story.
Right. I really like the idea that that PAX has of telling you where in the story it comes up with, because it really allows you to make reference to things or that have not have or have not happened, and I don't know, I like it. I like what he's been doing. So
Yeah, and I mean, the only time I've ever run into this is my very first set of missions, which all dealt with the Romulan Empire. I first built them on Tribble before the Romulan featured episode series was released, and then once Foundry went to holodeck, the featured episodes had come out and changed the Romulan storyline. The Republic didn't exist yet, but all of the events in the featured episode series had. And so, I mean, that's really the only thing I have had to alter any of my stories to fit, is that, those take place right after that ends with Seela's abduction. It was really just a quick fix with some dialogue. But I don't think I'll have to alter anything, because I don't think I've got anything that really deals with the Federation Klingon War.
Well, it's kind of an interesting thing that we, as Foundry authors, have a certain advantage over, say, like book authors. Because, I mean, book authors are kind of beholden to the television series and the movies. But if something changes in canon after their book is published, they have absolutely no way of going back and changing it. And I've read a number of Star Trek books that made assumptions about, like, TNG or whatnot, but that were things that later were contradicted. Like middle names.
And of course, the Star Wars universe is going through that right now with the new movies. They're announcing they weren't going to incorporate anything from the expanded universe.
Yeah.
Which I completely expected, but I am a bit disappointed.
Yeah.
Because I love so much of the expanded universe stuff.
They even sort of put Mara Jade in the remaster. It's not official, I think, but there's someone with red hair there.
So, Rogue says in the chat room we could level regulate our missions. Now, part of like the initial problem there is you think, what if you want to have a mission that literally has, no kill objectives? You've got, like you were saying, any level could play that.
Well, there's an easy trick for that.
I was going to say, there's an easy trick for that.
Drop in a Voth mob somewhere.
Drop in a Voth mob off on the corner of the map,
that you'll never encounter.
Your mission is gated to 50, and all you have to do is just put one Voth mob on some map somewhere, trapped behind walls, and bingo, you have a level 50 mission. So.
Yeah, and I've actually done that in a couple of cases, especially with Midas, so I could keep the leveling consistent between the different parts.
Yeah.
But like Johnny Snowball says, what if they level up and don't play those certain missions yet? And then
that's
play
you got to make a note of, this mission takes place after such and such mission. If they choose to have done that, or have chosen to not done that, that's sort of up to them, and they're gonna miss out on a bit if they don't.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, it's a recommendation. It's not a requirement, but this might help clear up some confusion if your mission is not taking place at the during the most recent STO events.
Because I can think of some missions. I mean, what was it? One of our recent Spotlight winners was sort of a direct sequel to Divide et Impera, and obviously, if you hadn't played that, you were going to be very confused.
It's one of my favorite missions. Captain Hunter did such a good job with that.
Or yours, in fact, Hippiejohn, Spectres Part 6.
If you'd ever played any of the rest of Spectres, it would make no sense. So.
Then you get something like mine in Cold Winds, where, if you hadn't played any of Spectres, you're probably going to be a little bit confused as to why there's a preserver on your ship when they're all supposed to be dead. Right. But the Star Trek V references, I think are probably okay, even if you hadn't seen that. And you're probably better off if you haven't seen that.
And of course, there's a lot of Foundry missions that really have no specific connection to anything going on in the timeline, and it could happen at any point.
And of course, we're into a point in the game where, and these sort of temporal issues are very difficult for a lot of MMOs, where anything that you play that's not either the featured episode or the Undine Battle Zone or any of the Undine Queued events, anything you play that isn't those is all back in 2409.
Yeah, and it's pretty. Yeah, and Cryptic is pretty specific that when you start a new character, that's 2409, no matter what time anyone else is going at. And so the timeline only progresses as you go through the story content, and there's certainly no reason why Foundry authors can't also take advantage of that time
So
progression.
we're talking about a little bit more, I guess, than just the new accord in the war. Here's a thought that really occurs to me that the effect of the most recent featured episode really, partially it was so effective on me as a player because I had gotten to run around the old Earth space dock, and I had gotten to run up to Egg and have him hand me biological samples to take to Memory Alpha. Like, all of that, the fact that I had played the game for a while and that Earth space dock of 2409 was a real place, right? Made the episode feel more impactful. I wonder if going forward, the fact that new players, that when they play the episode, Earth Space Dock will be being rebuilt exactly the same way that it was before, and they will have no idea going in, who somebody. So I wonder if that's another effect of the difference there, that and it's one Foundry authors are going to have to deal with, is with so much, we're already running into the trouble with the doors, with so many people having missions attached to old Earth space dock. So,
Well, I mean, yeah, there's something that's kind of lost in translation for a new player coming in to watch space dock be destroyed and not realize that this is the old Earth space dock. But at the same time, I don't think it's enough that it's going to confuse them, or
no, I don't think that it's something that's going to confuse them, but I wonder if it's something that Foundry authors can address. Especially, maybe it's a challenge to the community, maybe it's just put the thought out there that we have in the Foundry the only place that people can run around the old Earth space dock now.
Well, yeah, and in fact, if they wanted to, we could go back even further and show them the original Earth space dock.
The old Earth space dock.
So I'm just putting it out there that, going forward, the Foundry might be able to address for, in some way, that Earth space dock did definitely change in that episode, even if, I don't know, just a thought.
Well, it's currently the only Earth space dock that we, those two, the old one and the original one, are the only two that we have access to as far as using as maps in the mission.
Exactly.
So, I don't know, there could be an opportunity here for somebody to make a mission where you go and explore the old Earth space dock.
I don't know, maybe you could do a time travel mission.
Yeah. And meet Egg so that, new players know who he is.
Yeah.
What he did. And maybe we can do a little story about it. Maybe we can go back in time and see when he first got replaced. Or if he was always an Undine.
That would be a fun story, actually.
Yeah.
I'd love to see people show me when Egg got replaced. That'd be
Or, maybe not even a... Maybe... Okay, so what I'm seeing here is, not a time travel, just a flashback. So, you... In the aftermath of everything that happens on in the FE, you go and talk to Admiral Quinn, and he's wondering when his friend Egg was replaced, and then you go to a custom map and it starts 6 months earlier, or something like that.
That would be really, really
and then
fun.
You tell the story.
I like that idea a lot.
I'm very tempted to make that mission. And that's one that may be invalidated by something Cryptic does later.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think you're pretty safe on that one. I don't think they're going to go back to Egg.
They may not.
I doubt it. I kind of doubt it.
So I'm very tempted to make that mission. And it wouldn't have to be a complicated mission.
Hearing you talk about it, the thing that occurs to me is during the featured episode, the way that Quinn is like, Egg, what are you doing? And I don't know. I do get the feeling hearing you say, Admiral Quinn asking, what happened? When did my friend Egg get replaced? I had never thought of him as a friend, but you said that, and
I don't know, that's just the impression I got.
yeah, instantly it clicked, and it hadn't ever.
Maybe they've got a history.
I'd never gotten that impression until the featured episode, and it was just something in the way that Quinn's voice actor did the line. So,
It's
cool.
definitely a case that, even at the least, Quinn would have worked with Egg regularly. For years. It's kind of like finding out the coworker you sit next to at work was an Undyne agent.
But even you could explore that relationship and essentially make it whatever you wanted.
Yeah.
Let's see. I know. I think Mark has made a pretty decent Admiral Quinn likeness in the Foundry and could supply the sliders.
I know Mark did that. Lincoln in Space has a really nice one too, I think.
Mm-hmm. So we just have to figure out how to make Egg. I know he's a alien
he's
gen
definitely
guy.
alien gen.
I don't think he should. Yeah, he shouldn't have anything special about him that we can't recreate.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if he's an NPC contact in the Foundry.
No.
No?
I don't think so.
I'm pretty certain he's not.
I didn't think I'd ever seen him, but I know a lot of the other Earth Space Dock people are, so you could include them as well in the mission. Although they're all wearing the new uniforms, so maybe not. All right, so let's see, Hippie.
Yeah, I did have a topic. Sorry, I did hear you guys saying that through my headphones. I was dealing with a cat that was going crazy outside my door. So, yeah, my topic, I guess, is how would I say that? I experience missions differently now that I'm reviewing missions, and it almost forces me to. I almost have to play a mission twice. And even then, for example, I'll use the one I reviewed this week as my example. Even then, the first time I was playing through the mission, I wasn't taking notes. I wasn't writing down things that didn't work or anything like that. But my mind still registered them. It still registered visual glitches and map things that were happening, and the part of my mind that's always thinking about story and do the parts fit together? Is this logical? All of that, they're all always triggering whenever I'm playing a mission. And I realized that a year ago, a year and a half ago, before we started this show, when I would play a Foundry mission, I wasn't thinking about how the author was using triggers. I wasn't thinking about how the story pieces fit together necessarily consciously. I was just trying to enjoy the mission from the point of view of a player. And I realized that becoming a reviewer has, in a way, I'm kind of sad about it, has changed the way in which I experience almost every mission that I play, and that includes even, Cryptic's featured episode kind of thing. So for me, reviewing missions has had that effect, and I just wonder if anybody else who reviews missions has any sort of experience like that, or if missions get looked at differently kind of thing.
Yeah. I listen to a lot of writing podcasts because I write, not a lot, but I watch anytime I watch a movie or something, unless I get so engrossed in the movie I forget about it, I'm always noting like, oh, this is where they did this specific thing, or or they did this totally wrong, they didn't foreshadow this or whatever. So I think the more you know about how to do something, the less you can just watch a movie without thinking about the storytelling, or play a Foundry mission without.
The more you know about the craft, the less you can just experience it.
Right. It's like if you watch a movie with something that somebody knows everything about some topic, and that's in the movie. If they do it wrong, they're going to be, oh, they did it wrong.
Mm-hmm. like the case of I can't remember the astronaut's name, the Canadian astronaut that was sending back all of the great videos and everything when he went to see when he was back Earthside and he went to see Gravity. He ended up getting kicked out of the theater because he was heckling the film, kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, it's something I run into sometimes with movies, and I like to watch behind the scenes stuff, and then the next time because exactly how they did it, it almost looks sort of shoddy and cheap how they did it. Let's see, I think Robert Rodriguez is notorious for sort of filming a bunch of things that he thinks he might need somewhere, and then he'll throw them in because he has that and he can, even though they were filmed in a completely different context. And once you know that, sometimes it looks sort of shoddy, and even though it's really not, and it's sort of a weird thing. I don't know. I run into it a lot in real life as well because I go cover a lot of things as a journalist, especially as a small town journalist. I go to things like kids' music concerts, and because I was in band way back when, I look at it with more critical eye than, of course, the parents sitting in the audience are. Because I know about being in tune, I know about everybody keeping tempo, I know about all those things, and so I hear it when it's not happening, and so I'm maybe looking at it a little more critically than anybody else that is in the audience, and I have to try and make sure I curb that and I don't criticize anybody.
Or if they're softball parents, they're yelling at their kids, "No, tune that! You're doing it wrong."
Well, when you go to the sports events, it's a little bit different because the parents tend to be the most vocal and critical ones there.
Yeah.
To the point of I've seen some get kicked out, in fact. So yeah, no, I think it's absolutely something that we all experience, Hippie, when we do review things, and especially when we're sort of intimately involved in the creation of these sorts of things, and you know how everything works, so the behind the scenes.
It's good. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
It's good. It's good sometimes because you're like, well, why couldn't they just do this? And then you think about it, like, because that would be like 700 times more work. So yeah, I can see why they did it this way, not that way.
Yeah, for me, I guess what really made this topic just ping and crystallize in my mind was I remembered what it was like to play my very first Foundry mission while I was playing Orders, because the very first Foundry mission I ever played was a RogueEnterprise mission, and I realized that I experienced both Hero of the Empire, which is currently still my favorite mission in the Foundry, and Hero of the Empire and Orders. I realized that I had a very different experience playing them than I did the first time that I played a mission in the Foundry, which was a rogue mission. So it really crystallized as I thought about it. So it's a tough thing, I guess. I miss being able to just play.
Turn it off.
Yeah, I miss being able to turn off reviewing.
Unfortunately, that's something I was sort of almost never able to experience just because of the involvement I had with the Foundry, going back to way even before it hit Tribble. I was always an author. I was never just a player.
Gotcha.
So I envy you a little bit for that. Well, let's see. We started a little late, so we got a few more minutes. We got anything anybody wants to talk about?
Yeah, I got something.
Okay, go ahead.
Recently with Captain Gecko kind of talking about how we're not getting any major updates, but one of the things he usually emphasizes is that they are working on bug fixes. So obviously we've got a pretty long list of bugs. But I'm kind of curious, what do people think? What are priority bugs to people?
That's a good.
Copying things with triggers on it.
um,
Because
Yeah,
on my
the
mission,
copy and duplicate don't always work, do they?
no,
yeah,
they don't.
on my mission, unexpected reflection, ding. I
Shameless
could,
self-promotion.
yes, I I wanted to make. I realized later I could take a whole map transition out, but that would I don't want to rebuild the whole thing. I'd have to like do it by hand. I couldn't just copy everything.
Hmm.
So for that reason, there's a map transition I could get rid of, but don't want to go through the actual work to do it. Whereas if I could copy stuff, even if it took the triggers off, like that'd be easier than placing everything, etc. I think.
I've copied things between maps, although it gets a little weird because the vertical data isn't always preserved, or it isn't preserved relatively. So
Hmm.
whatever the last object that happens to be selected in the copy will end up at 0, and so everything will be framed relative to that. Which can run into a few issues if you have a very vertical map.
So I like this. You have 4 people here, and we're gonna get 4 different answers, I bet, and then we can have. This makes for a great community question, I think. My answer is the bug that has existed since they added patrols. Bridge officer pathing is a mess. There is no way for people to truly test their missions within the Foundry.
Well, we've never had true pathing in the Foundry for the very specific reason of that pathing isn't calculated until publish.
Until
Yeah,
published, that's
yeah.
true.
That's something that has never
Well,
Has never worked
been
right.
100% in the Foundry. I mean, there were times when, I mean, a mission that I built right after season 4, where I was having so much trouble with pathing in the Foundry that I eliminated some doors when I actually didn't really need to. Had I known to just publish it.
Okay. Then here's a different one, because there's a truth there. That's the case of that's just the way it is. So here's another one, and I don't know if it's a bug or if it's a design decision made at the beginning that they've never even thought about changing, and that is, again, it comes back to I want to be able to test my mission in the Foundry before I publish it. Give me the ability. There should be a way to test missions at any level. If the mission is going to be limited to level 41 plus, there should be a way to test the mission at that level.
Okay.
Well, so yeah, you're talking sort of features.
Not really. Yeah. It's not really a feature.
Well, it is
so
a feature because you
well,
need something to change change your character's test character's level.
No, Neverwinter has that.
Okay. See, so I don't know which bug bothers me the worst. There's nothing like the white textures going on right now or the load times.
Well, there's a couple that I know of that are kind of big ones, but have been around so long that most people kind of forget them sometimes.
Hit us.
One is the 000 bug, which used to be a lot worse because it used to affect everything, like bridge officers and just about any NPC would suddenly warp to the wherever the origin point happens to be on a map. Thankfully on ground that only happens in really rare cases, but it still happens in space maps. So enemy NPCs will suddenly jump halfway across the map while you're trying to shoot them.
Which gets especially annoying if you're trying to get a kill objective done.
Yeah.
During your testing. So I that was my answer when Dragoon asked me earlier, because it's something that is very universal and it affects everybody.
Yeah.
But I've also got a couple of other ones I kind of want to get people pondering on. Obviously, recently we had a kind of a bit of a breakthrough in the problem that was causing a player's space bridge officers to appear as generic bridge officers when you're on a ground. So you try to call the your space BO and some generic officer would appear instead.
Right.
So that's one. I mean, I've always kind of put that one high up just because it's a player-facing bug. So it's one of those things that it makes our missions not look as good, and there's nothing we can do about it. Because it looks weird for a random officer just to appear. Another one that we don't know for sure whether it's a bug or a fundamental limitation, but I suspect it might be like just one of those things that they never bothered to really get right, is the fact that we have to go through and redo every map when we go to restart a mission. So we go to drop, if we drop or go out of a mission halfway through.
If you beam out halfway through and you try and start it again, to pick up where you left off, you got to transition through every single one.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that it's always been that way, but it's pretty clearly this doesn't follow any design logic. So it's either something they just couldn't get around at the time, or it's something that didn't work properly and nobody fixed it.
Nobody's ever fixed it. Hard to say. There are a couple sort of small ones that come to mind, but they're ones that have annoyed me in the past. There's a bunch of ships that have been implemented in the costume creator, but aren't not working properly. I'm not sure if it's the texture is missing or if the model itself is missing, but there's just lights. The Andorian ships, the Scimitar are all like that. Another one is the lack of, for the colony buildings, the lack of almost anything on the 2D map when you place them. It's like they don't have a 2D icon.
True.
A lot of people use those.
The last one I kind of wanted to point out, and this one, kind of like what Hippiejohn was saying, isn't technically a bug, because it's pretty clear at some point this was a design decision, but it's the issue of not being able to scroll past the first or the top 50 missions.
Yeah, they said that was a decision.
Yeah, that was a design decision, but it
was a poor one, but in my opinion,
I would make the argument that it's an issue, and a pretty severe one.
You know what? I've got a way to. You know what? That is a bug. It is a bug because player facing, once that decision gets player facing, the effect on the Foundry community is devastating. It is not working as intended, unless the intention is to do what I call devastating.
Obviously, their intent was not that any missions beyond those 50 not get plays.
Or not get plays or ever get seen.
So yeah, the outcome
that was
is
not their intent.
Undesirable.
So the outcome was, to my mind, could not possibly be working as intended, and is so therefore a bug, and needs to be at the very least readdressed.
Okay.
That's an argument.
Yeah, no.
And if so, that's my
one that most of us agree with.
Yeah, and to finish this off, I want to pass this out to the community, that I'm going to want to hear your guys' thoughts on what it is that you feel is the top priority when it comes to Foundry bugs. Either just post it in the thread when we post this on the forums, or email us at Foundry Roundtable at live.com. But yeah, we just want to hear what your thoughts are.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we end it there? Chivalrybean, do you want to have a chance to plug your podcast and your reviews and things like that?
Yeah, on a couple different things. Star Trek Online, I'm on occasionally the Priority 1 podcast, which you can find at PriorityOnePodcast.com. Also, there are once a month written versions on the website. Those tend to be the more recent ones because I take pictures when I play now. Previously I didn't. I'm also the community manager of Guard Frequency, which is a podcast about Star Citizen, which is an upcoming game. So you can check that out too. See if it sounds like something you'd want to play.
Green
Guard
Dragoon is
frequency.com.
Green Dragoon is very excited about that one.
I am. But I like the
Sorry,
Wing Commander
and sorry, I
games.
talked over you there, but he said guardfrequency.com.
Yeah. And of course, you can always play my mission, Unexpected Reflection, ding, on the Foundry.
All right, Dragoon, why don't you throw up our contact info?
Okay. We can be reached, as I just said a moment before. Our email is foundryroundtable@live.com. It's entirely Drogon's responsibility for checking that, so if you don't hear anything, it's probably Drogon's fault. We're also on Twitter.
Twitter is a better way to get a hold of me, as
Yeah.
he will explain.
You can also get a hold of us on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab. Notice the LE are missing because Twitter won't let us make the name any longer. Drogon, you can contact Drogon directly at Drogon1701. You can get a hold of Hippiejohn to complain about anything he said at Hippie_John. And you can make fun of me for not getting up the podcast soon enough at Greendragoon.
Well done. Let's see. We will be, as I said at the beginning of the show, back to normal Wednesday the 7th at our normal time slot, which is 4:30 p.m. Pacific time and 7:30 Eastern.
Yes, it's definitely one that you guys are going to want to.
Gonna want to be here for. We've got a great surprise in store for you.
Yep.
Absolutely.
But for tonight, we will say, actually, this afternoon, we will say good afternoon.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.